I'm in Connecticut. A week ago, I heard a howl, much like the Ohio howl, about 9 p.m. Then around midnight, I heard two distinct tree knocks close by while I was in the garage. It was dead quiet. The knocks were loud. I still have no idea what it could have been. I tried to video the howl, but as soon as I did, it stopped. I heard an angry, irritated jungle bird one morning. I was out bow hunting. At first light, I heard a crash in the brush across the creek as I was setting the stand. Moments later, the bird calls started. Sounded like something out of a jungle movie, but it was loud. As I listened to the sound, I thought to myself, that's not birds flying away. It must be hopping from bush to bush, or walking. Never heard those type calls before or since. Was it Bigfoot? No idea, but it was strange. P.S. I remember I saw absolutely nothing on that morning hunt. Nothing. I had an encounter with the group I was in. We heard what we thought was an owl very close. Then the sound would happen again every minute or two and get farther away. I could never find an owl or any type of bird that would make that sound at 2 a.m. I believe it was a squatch. I have something in my woods. They try to sound like owls, coyotes, foxes, and others, but they can't quite get it right. LOL. Plus they make their own huffs, grunts, and other noises. I think they let me know they're around. If you hear enough the animals they imitate, you'll learn the difference. My first encounter was when I was 8 years old. Lived all my life in Washington State. My family had just moved out to a lake and we were getting settled in. A small lake called Wildcat Lake near Green Mountain in Kitsap County. We all played hard in the deep snow. We were exhausted by the time we came in for the night. The kids slept on the floor and I was near the first window. I don't know what woke me up, but something did. I remember laying there, listening for something. I noticed a small squeak and looked towards the window. I was not sure what I was seeing, but had an immediate feeling of dread. That kind you can't find your voice and can't move. There on the frozen window pane was a huge finger, slowly tracing the pane. I had a moment when I thought, no, that can't be what it is. But it continued and swirled a slow pattern down the window, occasionally letting out a squeak as it went. My first encounter, I was walking out from my bow hunting blind early October. It gets really dark early back in my blind, so I sneak quietly in the grass to the edge of our hayfield and sit for the rest of the daylight to fade. Well, on this evening, I smelled something awful. I thought, man, that pond stinks. I got a few more steps and felt a big, loud, deep huff, growl, bark. My first thought was, wow, I started a bear. I stayed still for quite some time looking everywhere. Foliage was still on the trees, and I saw nothing. I could smell a swamp, musky, crap, rotten smell the whole time. Beers stink often, so I assumed with the huff it was a bear. I walked backwards to the middle of the rise of the hayfield. And next week, I figured out it wasn't a bear. I had a Class A sighting in 2004 in Utah, and I found tracks in Florida on a cattle ranch in '05. It was fall of 1984. Me and my kid brother just arrived home. We lived on a dead-end road backwoods back then. We just walked into the bedroom, talking, facing the south window, when this Bigfoot walked right past. It had to be 9 feet tall, 4 feet wide, and at least 2 feet thick. This winter, me and my brother went back and camped for the first time since that night. My ex and I were separated on our down this ridge. He thought he was behind me and couldn't catch me. I did as he just told before the hike. Slid down the ridge, hit the creek bed that led back down the river. I thought he was following me to see how I'd handle myself. We didn't lose time per se, but definitely some mind control. I had a friend back in the 80s who was driving down a back road and spotted a Sasquatch in a creek as he was driving over a little bridge. Then he said he didn't know what happened, but he woke up or snapped out of it about 5 miles down the road, and he was still driving. He was very freaked out. All he remembers is making eye contact and then poof, 5 miles down the road. I used to fish religiously out at Forks, Washington. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., go pick up my buddy, make the 2-hour drive from Port Angeles, and head on the 101. Just once, something very strange happened. It was dark and early, very rural area on the highway. We made this trip regularly, and with no traffic, we always arrived at the same time before sunrise. But this time, I was driving and my car shut down completely. No streetlights, everything went black, and my car just died. And then seemed to just magically restart, and everything came back on. When we arrived at our regular fishing spot, we lost close to an hour. This was before the days of cell phones. We just knew that we lost time. It was daylight. I've had encounters with Sasquatch at this same fishing area also. This was about 25 years ago or so. I stepped around a tree, and at 8 foot away, there it stood. I panicked, tried to run, but my legs wouldn't work. I was too scared. As I turned to see if it was coming after me, there was nothing there. Nothing. But for the next 10 minutes, the outline of the creature was burned into my retinas, like when you stare at something too long and close your eyes, and you can still see the residue. This lasted for 10 minutes. I have no idea how long I stared at this creature. Everything seemed instantaneous to me, but it wasn't. He seems to make you forget. A weak translation from the First Nations people. I lived in northern Oregon, hunted, had a very close encounter, 10 yards perhaps, with a very territorial huge male. At home, I owned a pear and apple orchard in the edge of the Mount Hood National Forest. A family of 3 lived in my property. Eventually, there was daily interaction for a period of 9 years, yet not one single time did I sense anything supernatural, just smarter than the usual animal. My 100-pound black lab came running back and laid down between my legs and looked very scared. I was flagging a property boundaries units to be logged and slash mark individual trees to be felled by the loggers on that timber sale. My dog usually runs bears off, way before I see them. I told my dog Fatso, what scares you scares me. I put my pickup bed lid down, he usually jumps in, but as soon as I opened the driver's door, he jumped in, laid on the passenger's side floor. I left the area to work elsewhere that day. I live in North Carolina, but in the foothills. There is a dog kennel 3 houses down, and at night you could hear the dogs barking, and all of a sudden they stopped. And then one night there was a scream that I could only describe sounding like a pterodactyl from horror shows. I was so terrified, I went back into the house and locked all the doors. It makes me shake just talking about it. I saw one in the Ozarks when I was little. Many sightings near Fort Leonard Wood. Some guy habituated them on grandfather's farm. He deployed and grandfather was in the hospital. They killed all the goats and dogs. Many others. Saw one in South Carolina in 1998. I know what I looked at. It was in broad daylight. I'm in Ohio, and I swear I saw one a dozen years back. At night, and I was sober, I drove the back roads home. In the ditch walked the biggest black cat I've ever seen. easily 3 to 4 times the size of a regular cat. It took off, so I couldn't check it out. I've seen panthers here in Kentucky. I've heard the Bigfoot howls. I used to hear rocks being thrown in the creek I used to live by. My father-in-law saw a red orb going through the woods by that same very house. I grew up in a small town near Ames, and I saw one as a kid in the timber behind our house. When I was in high school, my dog brought a hand to the house that was massive. It went to ISU to be checked out, but was lost, apparently. Argyle, Iowa. We were driving down a lane between 2 harvested cornfields, and I looked up and said, "Oh my God, is that a gorilla?" It was on all fours with a silver sheen on its back and pacing our car about 50 yards out. I had time to look at it for a while. It did not have visible ears, snout, or tail. You could see that it was very muscular like a gorilla. I could see a face because it was black, but it was flat like a gorilla or a human. It had hair sticking out, framing the face like a chimp. It kept pacing us and looking at us until we turned on the highway and left. I was in shock for a long time because I couldn't figure out what it was. It took me several years and a lot of reading to come to the realization it was Bigfoot. I never believed in him before that. I seen one trying to catch a salmon like Schmeagol in a creek. My brother was asked by his classmate what kind of bear runs on 2 legs. She saw a 4-foot tall one playing in the lake, probably catching crawfish, and it stood up and ran into the woods. My dad saw a skunk ape swimming in a lake in Florida in the 70s. Near Pigeon Creek in Alabama, it's killed a hog. I was going to shoot, then it waded, swam across it. Them things can travel mighty fast compared to us. I was 12 years old, and it was around 3 a.m. in the morning, and this thing was just huge. My friend took off first, and I just watched this thing to see what it was going to do. I reached down and put on my baseball cap, and I took off, and my 12-year-old legs ran with fear and faster than I've ever ran before. All I seen was the breathing, and I think the steam coming from its body from crossing the Yakima River. I don't remember seeing ears on the one I saw, but her eyes looked huge, like a cow's eye, but her features were very human-like but larger. Her nails were black and thick, like a doggy toenail. I saw her up close. Saggy breasts, the torso from under her arms across her chest was sparse hair, and it looked like she had tiny dreadlocks. Her skin looked dark brown to black, weathered leather. Looked almost ashy black. Her hair was a color of Oklahoma red dirt to darker brown on the back of her shoulders. She swayed like a tree blowing in the wind. I remember it vividly. I was 10 in 1984. Eufaula, Oklahoma. The one I saw had obvious scar across her entire chest. My sighting, he looked just like a Neanderthal man in the face, only 9 foot and built like a crap brick house in West Virginia. The one I saw as a 12-year-old in Beaver Bend State Park, Oklahoma, near Boggy Creek, he was just standing there watching me pick flowers and pine cones. Looked like he was smiling. He was crouched between a tree and a big rock. I smelled every flower and pine cone, enjoying the natural smells. I did not smell him at all. Maybe he appreciated the fact that I was enjoying nature like him, or it was a mama Bigfoot and she enjoyed watching a child. It was about 18 feet from me, and I looked up when I heard a woodpecker in that direction further away. I wasn't scared, but did leave in a hurry and told my scout leader. I took her back to the hiding place because of the needles. We did not see any footprints, and we could tell the area someone was crouching there. On the ground there was a small pile of pine cones, and on top was a pretty purple flower. I'll never forget that. I was hiking in a remote area in Oahu in the Kanoe area, and I saw a white flash when it looked like it was opening into a tree about 5 feet, but it was probably 14 feet long. It hadn't left my mind since about 9 years ago. Couldn't make anything out of it. I felt uneasy, like I was being watched prior to that. Something rotten smelling was trailing us from Blue Hen Falls to Buttermilk Waterfall in the Cuyahoga Valley National Park near Helltown. This area is very well known for the Grassman. There's been missing people and bodies dumped. Many giants in verbal history by my village on the Big Island. There are burials in the lava tubes. In these, there are many canoes with very large individuals in them. Long red hair is the common denominator with these large skeletons. Salt was used to dehydrate the bodies, along with worldly possessions buried with them. We have coy wolves in Michigan, and I've seen them together here. The wolf was leading the pack, but agreed usually never stand one another. Also, I was driving to Detroit for work 120 miles from my home. I worked third shift and there was a snowstorm. I seen sitting next to the overpass a massive wolf. I don't know if it was a cryptid because it was sitting, but I do know 3.5 years later, I still can't get it out of my head. How proud it was sitting. How it was just startling. The size of it. Like I said, I don't know what it was. I didn't see it stand up. Just seen it on my way to work and the way it sat. It was definitely the alpha, or a cryptid, or both. But again, I'm not sure. My mother-in-law saw a large black panther run across the road in rural North Georgia. Later, heard it scream in a tree by her house. She was freaked out. I was running away from my mountain place for a while. I was back maybe 20 minutes or so. I had just turned things back on like the hot water heater. I opened the slider, walking onto the lower deck. I was just checking things out when I heard the strangest noise. At first, it sounded like a motorcycle going at full throttle, but it wasn't coming from behind me on the road. The noise was off to my right, in a rural area near the lake, and the lake had dirt roads with potholes. I saw a black panther when I was 12 in southwest Ohio. No one believed me. I'm 40 now, and at 35, my uncle saw one about 4 miles from where I saw the first one. Years ago, before hearing stories of thunderbirds, I was living on 724 outside of Birdsboro in Robeson Township. I was probably 15 or so at the time. My mom and I forgot now who else was all outside, but all of a sudden there was a massive shadow in the shape of a bird moving over the ground. If I had to guess now, it was probably 15 feet across or more. For some reason, none of us looked up. But after hearing stories of thunderbirds, I have often wondered to this day what casts such a massive shadow. I seen, I guess, what you'd call a dog man with a friend one night. Its face was more feline, kind of. It reminded me more of a wildcat that had a baby with a fox from just the overall shape of its head, how its ears looked. It had a snout like a fox, but only way bigger. I went into more detail on another post I did, and I even found the maps of where it happened. It's weird when you see something that close, because then you just wonder about everything. So in Virginia, I saw a thing when I was 11, June 1994. I'm pretty sure it was a Thursday. I was watching I Dream of Jeannie on Nick at Night. I got up and went to the kitchen to get a drink. The back door was open, screen door closed. You know that feeling you get when someone's staring at you? I felt that coming from the back door. I looked over and I saw this thing, 3 to 4 feet tall, all white, with black eyes and no other discernible facial features. I freaked out and ran and told my mom, who assured me that I was dreaming. Never mind the fact that I'm clearly awake. I don't remember why, but for some reason, I didn't have blankets on my bed that night. I laid down facing the wall. Last time I would do that for over 20 years. I felt the staring again. I rolled over and this thing was standing beside my bed. I jumped over the end of my bed and refused to go back in my room. I haven't seen it since, but I felt the staring many times over the years. As a child in Alabama, I remember my grandfather talking about seeing the hoop snake. I've ran across a hoop snake in the Georgia mountains. We knew it as a whip coach. Not much to tell. I was 13, walking to a fishing hole. I almost stepped on it at first. It stood straight up staring at me. Then it came right at me and rolled up. And while I ran, every time I looked behind me, it was right there. I ran all the way home. I'm 49 now, and it's still fresh in my mind. Okay, so it was mid-July 2010. I was coming home from a friend's house at 3 a.m. I used to live up a hollow in Marion County, West Virginia, about 2 to 3 hours from Point Pleasant. I came around what's usually a haunted turn on the hollow. I saw 2 huge red eyes and a massive black shadow. I slowed down to get a better look, figuring out it was just a bear. It turned its head right toward me, and I floored it. I was almost doing 70 miles per hour, and this thing was keeping pace. Slammed its head against my trunk, and I screamed. It followed me for 2 miles. This happens to someone every 3 months on my hollow. Same place, same creature. Has been since 1896. I wanted to share a story of an encounter I had, what's referred to as the Grafton Monster. Used to live out on the Monongalia and Tucker County line in West Virginia 10 years ago. I was renting a house on farmland on about 200 acres. I had always heard of the legend, but like anyone else, never thought I'd have an experience. I got up that morning, ready to drive to work. So I walked outside as usual to start my truck up after the normal routine, and I got a sinking, chilling feeling out of nowhere. So I kind of tried to hurry up and scan the perimeter while grabbing the gun out of the truck. The area had bears, for just in case. When I looked up on a hill, I seen a massive, dark-skinned black creature. Instinctually, thought it was a bear on its hind legs, so I kind of just stood there watching it. Started walking like a human. Then it stopped and turned. And in that moment, I realized I didn't see a neck. Just looked at its broad shoulders. No neck nor head. And it dawned on me what I believed I'm seeing. So I texted my boss, told him I'm not coming in due to an emergency on the property. I tried to record it on my phone, but the lighting was just awful and blurry. I stood there for a few more minutes. It let out an awful roar and growl. Just stood the hairs up on the back of my neck. Granted, it was a good 300 to 400 yards out. I stood there for what seemed like forever watching this thing till it disappeared into the tree line. I had a crazy, unexplainable experience last night. I think you guys would be interested in hearing about it. At about 10:30 p.m., I was taking my sisters out to go pick up pizza. We were driving back roads because it's usually the fastest way into town. So I'm going towards town. Another car was going out of town, and our headlights lit up just enough of the road to see. Standing on the side was this strange creature. My first thought it was this very big dog, but this thing was giant. The body color reminded me of a German shepherd, but with a thin body like a deer. It was standing on all fours with a hackles raised, but its body was crooked. Its pelvis was tilted in one way and its shoulders another. Its back was towards me the whole time, so I never got to see its head. And to be honest, I really don't know if I wanted to. I mentioned to my mom when I got home. She remembers seeing the same exact thing, exactly how I described it, in the exact same place years ago. The whole thing just has me freaked out. About 18 years ago, a large black dog ran in front of my car, but there was something very wrong with it. It looked dead. Its jowls were missing. Its tongue was hanging out the side of its very mouth, and it was super bone thin. I could see the bones move under the skin. It jogged slowly in front of me and disappeared into the darkness. It creeped me the hell out. Only thing I've had my crosshairs on and bring myself to shoot. Same as my late father. We both had crosshairs on it. A black panther dashed in front of our car in the green swamp late one night while we were driving up to Blairsville, Georgia. My family and I crossed paths with a group of 5 of them, broad daylight, Washington State, 1994, on the Tulalip Reservation, remote beach. We watched from the hillside, back in the trees, as a group of them swam towards the shore. They crawled up on the beach on all fours, stood up in the tree line, and melted into the woods. One stayed behind and watched us as we made our way back to the car. I got a really good look at him, about 8 to 10 feet. Rest of the group disappeared or moved on. I've hunted my whole life. The only thing I've ever experienced was one morning turkey hunting in spring in Alabama on a ridge above a large swamp at daybreak. About 100 yards away, suddenly, a roar, unlike anything I've ever heard, blasted towards myself and my hunting buddy. Then it tore out running through the hardwoods like a dang truck away from us. Thank God. It sounded like it was knocking trees down. You could clearly hear 2 heavy feet hitting the ground. I've hunted there my whole life and never had anything bigger than a deer on the property. The roar, as I call it, sounded like a cross between a lion and an elephant. This was about 30 years ago, and I'm still bothered by this. We were standing there in the dark for 30 minutes waiting on daybreak for the turkeys to start gobbling. It had to be watching us. I've heard many stories from relatives. My granddaughter, had an encounter about 2 years ago, and kind of an encounter when I was 8 years old. The whole family did, kind of. We had one growling at us in Hungry Mother Park in Southwest Virginia, 2018. Had an encounter on Longtown Road, Lisbon, Ohio, back in 1989 by the Boy Scout Bridge. One morning, about 5:45 a.m., I was walking to my deer stand. It was a full moon, so I needed a flashlight. As I got down to my stand and sat down, about 10 to 15 minutes later, I started hearing heavy footsteps and twig snapping coming from behind me in a cypress swamp. It stopped for about a minute or two. I could hear it breathing hard. It moved from my right to my left, then it turned and walked back down into the swamp. Not sure what it was, but I almost pissed my pants. I was shaking so bad. This occurred in South Georgia, 2010. Something I'll never forget. Cohutta Mountain, Tennessee. Twigs and pebbles being thrown off the cliff onto people's tents. Some howls through the night. The last night, there was a huge storm that swept through, and right before it did, we felt complete dread and terror out in the woods. It felt like something was hunting us down. It was worse than Sasquatch. I had a Bigfoot encounter when I was a very small child. The Bigfoot was never aggressive, but I was frightened. I wish we could prove it to the world so Bigfoot can be recognized as a protected species. Let's prove their existence. 10 years ago, hunting near Packwood, Washington, heard something screaming far away at first. It sounded kind of like a person yelling, but as it got closer, it was obvious that it was not. I've never heard anything like. I've hunted my entire life. To make a long story short, it was about half an hour, 45-minute encounter there. Being 3, we could hear screaming. They escorted us out of the area and back to my vehicle, about 3 miles down. It only made noise when our backs were to it. We could hear bushes and branches snapping and whatnot. I filled out a report with the Bigfoot hunters online, and they got back to me and said that's what they call an escort encounter. It's a very long story, but true as true could be. Hey, this is Bigfoot Anonymous, and I'm here with my friend who has a family member who worked at the Florida State Hospital and knows many legends over there. You want to describe a couple?
Oh yeah, like my mom, she worked at the Florida State Hospital over with the criminals over on that side, and she tells the story, or she told me the story of someone called the Magic Man. Said he had some really weird abilities about him. He would actually be able to. Well, she said she refused to look at him because she didn't want to be messed with, but he would call the staff over and say, "Want to see a magic trick?" And they said he would actually be able to levitate stuff across the room and do weird, freaky crap. And actually he would actually mess with the minds of the workers. In fact, he asked her one time, and she actually said no to him because she didn't want to be messed with. And she told me herself she's pretty sure he was demon possessed.
Jesus.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. That whole place, she said half the criminals there were probably demon possessed. She even told me someone was murdered there before she left. She was even decked in the mouth.
Jeez. They what I heard recently is that the nurse that was killed might have been stuffed in the ice box and killed in the elevator.
Yeah, she didn't tell me that much of it, but I know she said that they found her sort of hidden away.
Wow.
So it was pretty bad.
And do you know anything about the Ocheezy Wild Man? Is he buried over there at the Florida State Hospital, or is he buried in Chattahoochee?
I'm not sure. I think it's Chattahoochee, to be honest. I'm not sure, but
I know he was taken there, you know.
Oh yeah, he couldn't speak coherently. And they actually thought he was just a crazy man.
Yeah.
And it's kind of come about he was probably something else.
Yep. The Wild Man, the Bigfoot, our big brother from the woods, you know?
Oh yeah, we've got plenty of those around here.
100%. I hear him calling when I take the trash out, you know?
Oh yeah. There's some pretty weird junk out in this area.
Yeah, the South, you know what they say. Everywhere east of the Mississippi, Southwest Virginia's got some history.
Mm-hmm. Oh yes. My granddad told me some stories in the past too. He said that I don't know if it was him or somebody else said, but somebody in the family was walking down a road, and he said he was talking to somebody. So he looked over and a man was headless walking beside him.
Jeez. And I know over in Rocky Creek there's a lot of stories over by Wolf Slough, and my buddy Ronnie, who is ex-military, lives over there too. He said his grandfather seen a giant sloth with 3 claws climbing like a fence, and then a Titan cobra like the size of a sewer crossing the street, and then of course our hairy friend Bigfoot. One time was they were swinging on a swing at the edge of the porch, and he kept feeling a brush, and then one of them grabbed him, but luckily let go. But very, very interesting stuff down here in the South.
Want to hear a funny story?
Let's hear it.
This one's just funny. My granddad's story, of course.
All right.
He said he went walking down a road one time, and he heard something behind him walking. And he said he started walking a little faster. He kept getting closer and closer and closer. He was running.
Yeah.
He said by the time he got out where the moonlight could actually see it, it was a skunk chasing him.
Oh, wow. One of the more dangerous things, you know. There's ticks, there's monsters, and there's skunks, you know. That's what I'm scared of.
I've seen panthers, too.
And panthers, yeah. Giant panthers, bobcat,
bears.
And even bear, yeah.
They're
Many bear over by Rocky Creek, yeah.
Behind my house.
Yeah,
I've seen all of them. I've seen otters. I've seen
hogs, boar.
hogs. There's been gators go by us. So.
Giant gators. Even they have the rhesus monkey. You know how they let them free in Ocala, and they followed the river all the way past here to Alligator Point.
Yeah, they haven't got our way yet, but I know they go all the way. From what I know, they go up all the way to Ocala at least.
Yeah.
They said don't go there with shiny objects on.
Yeah.
They'll beat you up.
They'll come right for you. And Tarzan, why the original, you know, that's why they put him out there, is because there was like a Tarzan boat adventure. Tarzan won't save you.
Silver Springs.
Yep, Silver Springs, right where they filmed Jeepers Creepers.
Mm-hmm.
And I know they do a lot of ghost tours over there with the old Victorian houses.
Yeah, and I've seen Foxfire here too, so that's pretty cool.
And yeah, could you explain that too? I remember you talked about it before.
Yeah, I was driving home. This has been like 10 plus years ago. Driving home, it was late at night, and I turned on my road going home. I was near the house, and I literally saw a glowing ball of light in the sky above me. It just sort of boomed out of the sky, lit up the sky like lightning, and it just disappeared.
Wow. One or 2 days after the giant meteor shower that was the past 2 nights, you know, that's incredible. Foxfire, you know?
Mm-hmm. Foxfire, that's very common. It's easy to look up.
Wow, yeah, I'm going to check it out just because crazy things happen near the swamp, you know?
This is Jackson County. I mean.
Yeah. The courthouse is buried on a labyrinth of caves.
The caves.
Yep.
Yep.
The aquifer is right below us. All we know is could be giant megalodon and Godzilla type creatures and the entrance to the Middle Earth.
I mean, you've heard about the river. You can go out there and find full shark's teeth. They're about that.
Yeah.
Well, you can't see on the thing there, but they're
megalodon, the size of your
big.
palm. Yeah, even the size of your hand. You know, but I've definitely seen size of your palm ones, and that's not even counting the dang snakes that are over there too. It's an encounter.
Snakes. Oh yes, snakes everywhere.
Yep.
Snakes, spiders.
And then the famous Mill Pond, you know, with all the caverns over there, or the underwater diving caves, and
yeah, someone died in one of them recently.
Yeah, really recently. It's very sad. I want to talk to Mr. Sorensen and get some information about him because he's done some interesting recoveries, and he's done some investigations like at Vortex Springs, that diver that went missing.
Oh yeah. I can tell you exactly how to get to the one in Blue Springs.
Yeah, which one?
There's a giant cave underneath, like the diving area at Blue Springs.
Yeah.
Dive down off the highest point, off the diving board.
Yeah.
And it goes right down into a cave, and if you're good enough, you can loop into an air pocket.
That's awesome. That's right where they filmed Cobra Gator and Sharkasaw Woman's Prison Massacre.
Yeah, I heard about that. Did it ever get released?
Sharkasaw Woman's Prison Massacre did. I saw it. It was awesome. It was really funny. B movie, you know? Mm-hmm. And it's like a shark that could actually enter land, and it hunts down all these girls that escaped a prison. And then Cobra Gator has Michael Madsen in it from freaking Free Willy and Reservoir Dogs.
Free Willy.
But I don't know if it ever got fully released. I haven't seen it. I've been searching, but the trailer is on YouTube, and it is awesome. And like the Cobra Gator attacks the gas station over there, it blows it up. So every time I drive past the gas station, I'm like, Cobra Gator.
As long as it's not another one of those Sharknadoes.
Yeah. It might be the next Sharknado, you know. They'll just keep going with it. Like Florida Women's Prison Massacre, Kansas Women's Prison Massacre, California, you know. It just keeps hunting them down. But it'd be...
Oh, yes. This is I remember when they were filming that there.
Yeah. Well, man, I definitely appreciate the stories and the time. We definitely covered some ground, and I'm looking forward to one of these nights we could hit up Bellamy Bridge when both of us are off at the same time, take some technology out there and see if there's some spirits or weird electromagnetic energy.
Yeah, been there before. Yeah, it's pretty cool there.
It's definitely spooky. You know, the bride of Bellamy Bridge.
Yep. Maybe one day you can try to make it to the grave.
I need to see that. I heard it's like a mile down the river.
Just be careful. It's on somebody's land. He will shoot you.
He will shoot you. That's awesome. Well, on that note, man, be careful, stay safe, and stay awake. It's Bigfoot Anonymous.
No, my grandmother and my mother used to live about 10 miles apart, right? And I used to walk between them in the summertime. A lot of woods, you know. hair standing up.
Yeah, I can already feel it. That's
But,
scary.
I was walking one night to go see my uncle because he had came down from Alabama, and as I was walking down this dirt road, I kept hearing like these weird noises, like footsteps. You know what I mean? Like hard brush breaking, weird. And I was like, okay, it's just in my head. You know, it's dark. I'm like a young kid. You know. So I'm walking, and then I hear like this weird like, you know, but it's like deep, like really, really deep. And I like immediately stop. And I'm standing there like, oh my God. You know, no moonlight, no lights whatsoever. And then I had a lighter on me. So I catch this stick on fire, and I'm like walking. I'm like, okay,
That's smart.
I can't see, but this is working. Hold my hand up to hide the light so I can still like see better. And when I turn, I'm right next to the woods on this road. And like a little bit down, I saw like a gleam. You know what I mean? And I was like, okay, this is weird. So I started running. I was scared, crying. And I got to the town part, you know what I mean? And I was okay, everything's good. Everything's all right. It was just my imagination playing with me.
Daddy.
Well, I stayed the night with my grandmother that night, freaked out. Didn't want to make the walk at night, but stayed a little too long at my grandmother's that day.
Yeah.
And on the way back, I actually took a flashlight, like a little lantern with me that she had bought me. And when I was walking, I heard it again, like the steps. And I was like, no way. You know, this can't be. It's my imagination. And then I got really scared, turned, threw the lantern. And when I threw the lantern, I saw it, dude. It was like a furry, just leg and half its torso. You know what I mean? I was like, oh my God. And then started running for real.
Wow.
So, I mean, I have no doubts that it was Sasquatch.
Oh, 100%,
you know what I mean?
man. There's been a lot of reports in this area.
Yeah.
Where exactly was it?
Bluntstown.
Bluntstown. Wow. Yeah. I've heard some a lot of stories in Bristol, and
The
that's the same.
smell,
Yeah.
it was like a. You ever had like damp clothes sit there for a while? You know that
Definitely.
smell?
Yeah.
It smelled like that almost, just really, really pungent. You know what I mean? And it was just a weird time. You know?
Yeah, that's definitely that's thrilling. What did you tell any of your family members or anything? And what did
I
they
told
say?
my uncle, and I told my grandmother, and I told my mother, and none of them believed me. They said it was all my imagination.
Dang.
It was just.
Any is your uncle like a hunter or anything?
No.
Have you told any hunters or anybody that might have had it? You know.
Everybody I tell laugh at me.
Yeah,
So, I mean,
they're conditioned like to think like that, you know,
yeah.
just because it's honestly scary because there's kids out there that make that walk every day, you know, and families should know, but they don't, and that's messed up. You know?
Now the weird thing is everybody wants to say how aggressive they are and blah blah blah. If it was aggressive, I think it would have got me.
Yeah, it would have got
you.
you. Yeah.
So I mean, maybe it was just curious, or
Definitely.
you know, I don't know.
Maybe it was a teenager one too, you know.
Could have been.
There's
It
plenty of
could
them
have
out
been.
there, so there's good ones, there's bad ones, there's ones that'll take you, there's ones that'll help you. I've heard stories of them like picking people up out of the river when they're unconscious, you know.
What?
Oh yeah, and then back in the day, the Native Americans used to trade with them, you know, just because they're just a species of hybrid man, like a man off the beaten path, off the trail of tears, you know.
Right.
It's freaking crazy, yeah. But I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, no
I'll
problem.
end this. That was freaking a wild story. I feel alligators. A young woman in town married a man from another part of the country. He was a nice fellow, and they got along pretty well together. There was only one problem. Every night he'd go swimming in the river. Sometimes he'd be gone all night long, and she'd complain about how lonely she was. This couple had 2 sons. As soon as the boys could walk, their father began to teach them how to swim. And when they got to be old enough, he took them swimming in the river at night. Often they would stay there all night long. The young woman would stay home all by herself. After a while, she began to act in a strange way. At least that's what the neighbors said. She told them that her husband was turning into an alligator and that he was trying to turn the boys into alligators. Everybody told her there was nothing wrong with a man taking his son swimming. That was a natural thing to do. And when it came to alligators, there just weren't any nearby. Everybody knew that. Early one morning, the young woman came running into town from the direction of the river. She was soaking wet. She said a big alligator and 2 little alligators had pulled her in and had tried to get her to eat a raw fish. They were her husband and her sons, she said. They wanted her to live with them, but she had gone away. Her doctor decided she had lost her mind, and he had her put in a hospital for a while. After that, nobody saw her husband and boys again. They just disappeared. But now and then, a fisherman would tell us about seeing alligators in the river at night. Usually it was 1 big alligator and 2 small ones, but people said they were just making it up. Everybody knows there aren't any alligators around here. Hey, I'm Connor from Bigfoot Anon, and I'm always on the hunt for the next big adventure. When you're on the trail for long hours, you build up quite the stench, enough to drive any skunk ape or yeti away. Luckily, I'm on the quest now for the solution to all my problems. Yeti bars. They do exist. Available in tons of different scents and fragrances. Check out YetiBars.net for more and use my code BA10 for a special offer. Clean like a beast. Yeti Bars!